The spring cleaning plant chores continue, and I've come across some things that desperately need attention. Oh no, it is so sad. I am on a mission to get everything properly rehabbed, rejuvenated, and back to a really good state before summer properly kicks in. So that is what we're going to be doing today. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name's Claire, and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learnt over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And yeah, by all means grab some plants of your own and do things along with me and we can do it together. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. Oh, it's literally just started to rain, but like really nice, fine, gentle rain. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera. In fact, that's a silly thing to say. Of course, you're not going to be able to see it on camera. But I hope you can hear it because it sounds lovely. But one of the things that I didn't realise when I was setting up to film this video is just how low on soil I am. And I feel like I spend my life saying that. I feel like every time I get more soil, it just goes. I get through it so quickly. So I'm gonna make do with the very small amount that I've got today, and I'm gonna try using some other substrates as well and playing about with things a little bit that way. But firstly, the Aglaonema that I chopped up in my plant chores video the other day, the one that had got root rot, and I was like, I'm going to completely restart it. I put it into moss with absolutely no rootage whatsoever. Look how much it has perked up. So I'm really, really glad that I did that. Although it isn't rooting just yet, it's clearly done good things for the plant immediately. So that just kind of solidifies the way in which I tackle the next thing, because I've got another very sad Aglaonema, and this is another one that actually started going downhill at the same time as this lovely tigress. And this is my, oh, it's very sad, but this is my Aglaonema Jubilee Compactor, which as you can see is just not looking well. And I think probably pretty much the exact same thing happened before I went off to Malvern. I did a mass water very, very quickly, and I was not as vigilant as I should have been. And with certain plants like these that are in kind of cover pots that don't have any drainage, typically I will always, and I bang on about this so much, but typically I will always take them out to water, let them properly drain through. But I just didn't do that for a few of them. I think plants like Aglaonema that are typically a little bit hardier, I have, as I say, just got a little bit complacent with. I watered it through, and I suspect I have now caused the roots to start rotting. So I'm gonna do pretty much exactly what I did with this one. I'm gonna just get it out, give it a prune back, have a look at the roots, and then probably get it into sphagnum moss. In fact, I'm quite low on sphagnum moss as well, but I definitely have enough to get me through today. Oh, and I also clearly didn't clean up from the last time I was using my potting mat, which is pretty standard. Let's put this on the floor and deal with it later. But yeah, the other thing that I thought I would continue with today, because I know in my plant choresy video that went up about probably 5 days to a week from the time you are watching this, I'd asked you guys to send in some questions over on Instagram, and I made it through not as many as I wanted to in that video. So I've got the other questions. Oh yeah, already I can see it's exactly the same case. But I've got the rest of the questions here, and I thought I could go through them today because I love answering your questions, and it feels like a nice opportunity to kind of interact and actually, I know it's not chatting, but it feels more chatty than me just waffling on about what I'm doing the whole time. So I'll obviously walk you through what I'm doing, but I thought I could kind of multitask. But looking at this one actually, just initially, although it's not great, it's got a little bit more rootage, like savable rootage, than the other Aglaonema. If you have a look there, you can see there are some kind of full, healthy, pale roots, which is such a good sign. I am going to need to still give it a pretty significant chop back, I think, but that should be really good in just kind of getting the plant started again. The only thing is it is quite yellow towards the base of the stem, but to be honest, I don't think that's anything that I should worry about. I'm obviously going to be keeping these sections very closely monitored, and it is typically quite a hardy plant, so I would have thought it would be fine. But yeah, I'm just going to start off the tedious task by getting all of the dead roots off and giving it a proper chop back. And while I do, the first question today, someone asked, is there a way to make things propagate and grow roots faster? I mean, in short, yes, there are lots and lots and lots of things you can do to speed up the propagation process. It does depend on what you're propagating. For example, if you're propagating a tropical plant like Monstera dubia, for example, just because it's the one I looked at, if you're propagating a plant like that in just kind of like your standard home environment without changing anything or without kind of adapting your environment to be more suitable to that plant, even if the mother plant has been perfectly happy living in your home, like standard room conditions, chances are you could 100% be speeding things up if, for example, you were to do things like potentially increase the temperature a little bit. There's a reason why a lot of people use heat mats for propagation. I'm not saying that's completely essential. I actually don't use heat mats, in fact, hardly at all nowadays. In fact, for a lot of tropical plants, what I always say, my general rule of thumb is typically if you slightly increase the temperature, the light, when I say light, I mean light intensity alongside the hours of light that plant's receiving, and increase the humidity as well, then typically, that's a little bit generic, but typically that is a way to get things to grow much better and root much faster as well. And for that reason, I've showed before, but I often use like boxes like these, like big storage boxes. So long as they are completely sealed, they make amazing propagation containers. And I might actually get into this one shortly. It's not looking great in there. I've got quite a lot of things that I need to tackle, and I'll talk you through that when we get to it. But yeah, they on the whole make really great little containers because they store humidity, they keep everything safe from kind of external factors like pests and cold drafts and all that sort of stuff. If you leave them somewhere close to a window, they tend to stay fairly warm, especially in the UK here at this time of year. But of course, things like cabinets as well. I propagate so much in my cabinets because it does tend to offer higher levels of all the things my plants really enjoy when I propagate, because typically 90% of my collection is tropical plants. So yeah, that is what I do. That's what I found has really, really helped. In terms of things like seed germination, also it's a really loud crow. I don't know if you can hear that. In terms of things like seed germination, that is when I would potentially consider introducing a heat mat if you're living somewhere that isn't very warm, or if it is winter, for example. I've had questions before as well about whether or not I propagate all year round. And personally, I do. I don't stop propagating just because we're going into the winter months. I think so long as you're able to keep conditions stable and mimic what your plants like, then there's no reason at all that you shouldn't be able to propagate all the year round. So yeah, that is just my thoughts on it and what I would be doing if I was trying to increase the speed at which my plants propagate. For example, although Aglaonema is, as I've already said multiple times in this video, a very hardy genus, I think what I will probably be doing is getting these bits into my cabinet, just because, I mean, as I say, these actually do have a pretty good little root system on them that is savable. But if I want to get them to root quickly and get them hopefully potted up as lovely full plants again in the next couple of months, like I just know in my gut that the best way to do that is by getting them into a cabinet environment, should I say. But yeah, that is what I do and what I would recommend. Why do my plants' leaves get crispy edges? So there can be quite a few underlying causes of this, but I would have thought, I mean, the most common one in a home environment typically is lack of humidity. That is, I mean, when I encounter that in my home, that is always a very telling sign that I need to crank the humidity up. As I've just said, obviously a lot of the kind of lush foliagey plants that we bring into our homes are tropical plants, and a lot of them are tropical rainforest plants, and they're used to living in kind of like 80 to 90% humidity, and we bring them into our homes and we expect them to be absolutely fine with like 30 to 40% humidity. And some are really adaptable and they can grow okay, or they can actually grow quite well once they've adapted to lower levels of humidity. And others are going to be drama queens. And when I say drama queens, that's actually not the best way for me to be putting it, because it is an environmental stress factor. They are just showing a lack of what they're getting, and it's actually your plant's way of kind of communicating with you and saying, look, I'm not happy, this is what's wrong, please increase my humidity. And obviously you can invest in things like humidifiers. I've got a big Levoit humidifier that I run. Not all the time, actually. I run it maybe like a few days a week whenever I think to put it on. I'm not as strict and vigilant as I used to be, but also at this time of year when I'm doing lots of watering, typically the room humidity is a little bit higher. Like, it does feel a little bit like a greenhouse in here. And that's actually a really good way, if you don't want to run a humidifier all the time, or if you can't afford to run a humidifier all the time, is just to leave like bowls of water out around your house, because obviously as water evaporates, it's going to naturally increase the humidity of the air. For example, I never ever run a humidifier in my cabinet anymore, but I do just sometimes put little pots of water in there so that when it's really hot, I know they're going to evaporate and they're going to just help to keep levels nice and high in there. But also it is important to remember that as plants transpire, as they breathe, they essentially produce humidity for each other because they release water. So if you have got a lot of plants in a contained space, often you won't need to run a humidifier because the humidity levels are just naturally going to be that little bit higher. So yeah, as I say, that is the main cause of browning on the leaves. I mean, any kind of stress signs on your leaves can be a sign of underwatering, it can be a sign of overwatering. And I know all of these things are very confusing, because you can be like, if the signs look exactly the same, how do I know if I'm underwatering or overwatering? And typically when that's the case, I personally just kind of strip it back to basics, and I'm like, okay, let's look at the roots, let's make sure everything's healthy, eliminate that issue straight off the bat, because so many issues do start with the roots. As you can see, I had signs of like yellowing leaves and all sorts, and that is because it is a root issue. But assuming your roots are absolutely fine, I would just remind yourself of what your plant actually likes. For example, if it's a plant that lives naturally in marshland, like boggy environments, then it probably likes lots of water. And if you're letting it dry out, even if you're just letting the top layer dry out, that it might not be getting enough water, and that could be a stress response to that. Assuming we're not talking about plants like calatheas and carnivorous plants that do like very high levels of moisture in the soil, I personally have typically found that stress signs on the leaves are usually a sign of too much water. Usually it's a plant not being able to process everything they're being given. It can obviously lead to issues such as root rot. And I've said it in so many of my videos before, but if anything, apart from in this case that we are dealing with today, if anything, I am an underwaterer as opposed to an overwaterer. If I'm not 100% sure that a plant is ready for a drink, then typically I'll go away for a few days, I'll wait, I'll check back, and only when I'm really, really sure will I go ahead and water. So yeah, I think that's just a really easy way to just eliminate things straight off the bat, because so many plants do suffer from issues as a result of too much water, or again, in my case, not being able to properly drain, which is kind of the same as overwatering. But I've got these two sections cleaned up. I've got all of the dead roots off. I'm just left with healthy roots. And last time I split up the sections of Aglaonema, but actually I think I'm gonna do these ones all together, and I think they should be totally fine. I've just been kind of scanning the plant as I go through as well, and making sure that it's not pesty at all, and I can't see anything. I've said it before, but typically, touch wood, Aglaonema, also there is another section I forgot about, but Aglaonema is a genus of plant that I have never found to be affected that badly by pests. In fact, I don't think, bar I think the occasional like one-off thrip here or there, I don't think I've ever struggled with pests on any of my aglaonemas, which is really nice. It's so nice to have low maintenance plants that, I was going to say take care of themselves, obviously not take care of themselves, but don't give you any grief, don't make your life any more difficult than it needs to be. So yeah, I absolutely love Aglaonema. I think it is such a great genus and I want more of them. What do you do differently in winter for semi-hydro, as I had a lot of root rot in alocasias? So, I wouldn't say I do anything differently per se, but I think, again, similarly to what I just said about underwatering and overwatering, if anything, I tend to fill the reservoirs a little bit less than some other people do. Sorry, what I should have said, step one is make sure that when you're using semi-hydro, you've given it a proper rinse off first, because obviously the dust that collects around the bottom, when that builds up, when that kind of residue builds up over time and that's mixed with water, that can cause your plant's roots to start rotting. If you give it a really good rinse before you use it and then just don't knock the container about too much, then typically it's absolutely fine. That is point number one. But yeah, as I was just saying, this isn't actually just specific to over the winter months, but on the whole, I do tend to be the sort of person that doesn't fill my reservoirs too high. Like, for example, I've got an anthurium. This is my Anthurium SP Lemon that is just starting to grow back. I've got this one in semi-hydro at the moment, and it's got the tiniest, oh, you can't even see it. It's got the tiniest reservoir in there. It's literally like 2 centimeters. And although there are some plants that can tolerate and take higher reservoirs, and in fact, like if you're going away on holiday, I would recommend filling the reservoirs a little bit higher. On the whole, I think underfilling and filling more regularly, particularly with plants such as alocasias that can be quite susceptible to root rot, is how I would go about things. Also, over the winter months, obviously, your plants aren't typically going to be requiring as much water, just purely for the fact that they're probably not getting as much light and the temperature's probably not as high, so they're not going to be consuming as much as they would usually. So yeah, for that reason, I would be filling the reservoirs less frequently, just because you're not going to need to fill them anymore. And yeah, slightly lower as well. The other really great tip for semi-hydro just in general is using transparent containers, just so that you can monitor the root system. And to be honest, I do this not just with semi-hydro, I do it with so many substrates, so many plants. You'll be able to see some behind me, all in transparent containers. I'm using a transparent cup. This is just this is actually a cider cup from Malvern. I've got lots of them. I was running around collecting them when I was there. But yeah, I use transparent containers for lots of my plants that are either susceptible to root rot, or I think might have root issues, or are rehabbing, anything like that, where I just want to be able to keep a really close eye on them. So yeah, with lots of my plants that I've got in semi-hydro, I use things like old jars. I'll just wash them out. I said in one of my videos recently, actually, I went to a local charity shop, and oh my God, charity shops around here always have like loads of old, like really pretty glass containers, like whiskey glasses and even wine glasses and stuff like that, that usually aren't part of a set and they're just a bit mismatched and they just sit there on the shelves. And I think they make such beautiful containers for plants. So I'm always buying them. In fact, the last time we went to a charity shop, we got loads of lovely little bottles. And this one here, Ross has made a little terrarium out of, which I think is so pretty. I think this cost us maybe about 50p. And it's such a lovely little bottle. You can also get like cork stoppers with LED lights that you can use to top your terrariums, and then they light up and they're really pretty. And typically as well, the light provided, assuming it's quite a bright light, it can be enough to act as a grow light and grow the plants in your terrariums as well, which is pretty cool. We haven't done it with that one, but I have done it in the past. But yeah, as I say, I think I will probably put this along with the Aglaonema tigris into, if I can find room, into my cabinet. And I really do hope, I think this one especially stands a much better chance of getting there quicker because it has already got some roots. But I do hope in the next, I mean, maybe with this one in the next month or so, I might be able to put it up and get it going again. But yeah, I feel like the right thing has been done here, and I'm just going to monitor it now and hope it bounces back quickly. Oh, and one of the other things that I brought over to show you, this is what I think is quite an exciting update. So basically, I have been kind of moaning about my Ficus schweriana for such a long time. The Ficus schweriana is it's beautiful actually. I'll put a picture on the screen of what it looks like when it's healthy. But it's basically just a variegated rubber plant, and it's so pretty, and I have just had battle after battle after battle after battle with mine. Oh, my camera battery just died. Sorry about that. I'm so bad at monitoring my camera and looking for when it's going to die. But what I was saying is I've had battle after battle after battle with this plant, and the last thing that happened with it is it got spider mites, and it had been just, as I say, one thing after another. So I was just like, I'm either going to throw this plant in the bin and stop letting it be the bane of my life, or I'm going to chop it back and I'm just going to see what happens. And I completely lopped it back. I chopped back all of the leaves, literally cut the stem in half. And I just looked back in the bag today because I haven't looked back at this plant since I did this, which was probably a month ago now. And look at all these diddy little leaves that it's putting out. Like, there are so many of them. So again, this is another case where I feel like chopping your plants back and resetting them might have just won the day again. I feel like it's going to hopefully be a much bushier, much more gorgeous plant now. Like, I think by the looks of it, every single point that is starting to come out now will branch. So I will have a really gorgeous full plant. I really hope that's the case. I really hope that's the case because I just wasn't a massive fan of how it was growing for me before, to be honest. So yeah, I will keep you updated. I'm going to keep it in its bag. Again, I've said it before, but this is a really great way of isolating plants if you're dealing with pests, for example, or similarly to the box propagation method. It's just a really nice way to keep the humidity high and create a sealed environment for a plant as it regrows. And this one has regrown very quickly, going back to quick ways to propagate, and it's been right in my window. So yeah, what I will do is I will just seal the sandwich bag, and when I'm left with like a couple of centimetres at the end, like unsealed like that, I'll just blow into it and then I'll seal it. So it's now like a little bubble. It's in there, it's sealed, it's got lovely humidity. I don't need to worry about watering it. I just check back on it every now and again, and I'll come back to this one in another month or two and I'll see how it's doing. But I wouldn't have thought it would really need anything doing to it so long as that is properly sealed. So yeah, I will keep you updated with it. But I'm excited for the first time in such a long time. I'm excited by that plant and I want to see what it's going to do for me next. But where do I go next? I brought so much stuff over, ambitiously so much stuff. I think I'm going to tackle this one next. Again, I hope I have enough soil for this. So, another Aglaonema actually. My Aglaonema cutlass, which I absolutely love, is one of my favourite Aglaonemas. I have raved about this one so much over the years since I got it. However, it has never been repotted in the time that I've had it. I have never changed out its soil. It's in really quite a small pot for the size of the plant, and I lifted it out the other day and just had a look at the roots, and I don't know how well you'll be able to see, but look at those. It is so ridiculously root bound, and it is also quite dry at the moment as well, which I'm not too worried about. I'm just going to kind of brush as much as I can of this substrate off. You don't need to get it all off, to be honest. I just want to, above everything, just make sure that there's room for nutritious new soil to go in, because I feel like, although I have been fertilising it, it will have absolutely rinsed the nutrients from this soil because it's been in here for such a long time. And I have just noticed that this plant it's doing well, but it is not putting out quite as much growth as I would have expected this time of year, especially when I compare it to how it was doing this time last year. And it is also curling much quicker, and that is simply because there's so much root, it is drinking the water so quickly, and it therefore is needing to be watered much more frequently. So yeah, I'm gonna loosen the root ball and then get it into some new soil. I could put it in semi-hydro actually. Do I want to do that? No, I think I'm going to stick with soil. The next question was, what is Ross's favourite plant? So in my collection, Ross's favourite plant is the Bird of Paradise. He absolutely loves it. And his least favourite plant is my Monstera dubia. He really doesn't like it at all. He thinks it takes up too much space, which, I mean, she kind of does nowadays. And I think when we've got a bigger place, we'll be able to appreciate her in all her glory more, because at the moment she is just a little bit of a barricade to getting onto the balcony or round that side of the sofa at all. But yeah, he loves the Bird of Paradise. And he's also building up a really nice little collection of plants himself. And I know in a video a while ago I said about, like, if Ross is getting plants, should he be caring for them? And bless his heart, he has been so good since I said that. He has been so good at caring for his plants. And he seems to be really enjoying it, which is so nice. And I said this literally the other day, but it is so not that I need him to be a planty person. Like, honestly, so long as he doesn't mind living with plants, I couldn't give two tosses whether or not he likes them, but it is really quite fun to watch him start to get into it and kind of start to ask all the questions that I was asking when I first started getting into it, and like see plants out and about and want to bring them home and want to learn about them. So it's quite fun that it's something that we can kind of share together a little bit. Like he's asking about when we're next going to be making terrariums, and we've got all these projects that we're kind of planning, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. However, that wasn't the question. The question was, what is his favourite plant? So in his collection, I'll have to check this with him actually, but I think I'm under the impression that his favourite plant is currently the Begonia brevirosa, which I've got a cutting of up there, but I'll put a picture on the screen because it's the black and pink begonia. And he's propagated 2 sections of that now himself, and he's got obviously the full mother plants. And yeah, he just seems to really like that one. That and Fertonia, actually. He really likes Fertonia, and I think, again, onto the terrarium thing, like the little one I just showed you, he's propagating lots of Fertonia. But I would say those are probably his top ones at the moment. But we can ask him this question because we are going to be doing a terrarium build in the next... We were going to do it last weekend, actually, but then we didn't get around to it. In the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to get you guys to send in some questions. So if you've got any questions you would like to ask me or Ross, or me and Ross, they can be planty, they can be personal, they can be whatever you like. Drop them down below and I will include them in that video. But yeah, my God, these roots are so rooty. They are properly tied up. One of you said, can we see all of your plants, please? Yes, you can. I've made houseplant tour videos. In fact, for the last few years, since I've been on YouTube, I've been making houseplant tour videos from time to time. And I did an up-to-date one, I think about 2 months ago now. So if you want to see pretty much, I say pretty much all of my plants because I have acquired some since then, but pretty much all of my collection. I made like a 3-hour long video taking you through every single one of them, so I will link that down in the description box below if you want to go watch it. I had a lot of fun making it. And the ones that I've added to my collection since then, the majority was in my big houseplant haul from the Malvern Spring Show where I got 20 new plants, and again I did make a video on that. So if you want to see all my plants, that is how I would recommend doing it. Right, so that's the pot size we were working with before, and I've got a couple of pots here actually, and I think this one, which I think is probably like a 14 centimetre pot, should be about what this plant needs. Yeah, perfect. And I'm really hoping actually I've got enough soil to be able to do this, because I think this is going to be cutting it fine. I think this is going to be cutting it really fine actually. I might need to do a shallow pot for the time being and then come back to it when I've got some more soil. I don't know why I always let it run so low. I recently put my orbifolia into semi-hydro and now it's wilting. Help. So it is very, very, very common when you transfer your plant from one substrate to another, whether it's soil to semi-hydro, whether it's soil to moss, whatever it is very, very, very common to see a little bit of stress in your plants. Not all plants are going to stress. Again, like for example, the Aglaonema, that's a very hardy type of plant, but Calatheas, oh my God, they can be some of the most sensitive, dramatic plants in the entire world that I've ever experienced. So it's very normal to experience some signs of stress for the first, I was gonna say first few weeks. I mean, I'm trying to think, when I put my orbifolia into semi-hydro, I did lose quite a few leaves and I did have quite a bit of yellowing, I think for the first month or so, and then it kind of adjusted and then it started putting out beautiful growth and it was happier than ever. And then I was really glad that I made the switch, because there was a point where I was like, oh my God, why have I done this? I would probably say if the plant starts to go downhill so dramatically that it looks like it's dying, then obviously don't wait it out. I would definitely recommend checking on the roots and making sure that they haven't started to rot or anything like that. Sometimes if you do leave some soil on the roots of your plants, then when they come into contact with the semi-hydro, the plant can start to rot. This is why I say always try and do your best to get as much organic matter off the roots before transferring into semi-hydro. But yeah, if it's just the first month or so, first few weeks, first month, and you are experiencing some leaf loss, I would say that's normal. Like, I have had the same thing. I've had the same thing with alocasias as well. I think sometimes they do just, especially when they're very used to growing in something, like if you've had a plant that's been happily living in soil for a year and then all of a sudden you're yanking it out of soil, you're showering down its roots, you're putting it into a bunch of rocks and then you're pouring water on it, it is going to go, whoa, this is so different. And the classic thing is that they do lose leaves when that happens. So I wouldn't worry too much, unless, as I say, unless it's been ages or unless the plant actually looks like it's dying. I wouldn't worry, personally. There we go. Perfect. Cool. I will give that a water through after I have finished filming this video. Oh, and the other one that I wanted to, I mean, to be honest, there's more that I want to repot, but I am limited by my mediums that I have. But the other one that I wanted to repot was my Boston Fern, which, to be honest, I'm just going to take it out and have a look. Wow. Yeah, that is rooty. Look at that. Maybe it's not desperate for a repot. It's just another one that I'm watering. I mean, it is a plant that likes to stay consistently moist, but it is another one that I'm watering so much at the moment. Like almost, not every day, but like 2 to 3 times a week. I don't think it's desperate for a repot though. I don't think it's desperate. I think it can hold off a little bit longer. The one thing I might do is just give it a little bit of a prune. It's got, again, it's not awful, but it's got some kind of brown bits underneath. Again, just from where older sections have died back. Again, it's a plant that loves humidity and it's been so hot in here recently and I haven't been running my humidifier that much. So I'm just going to give it a little neaten up. Get rid of some of those dead bits, get it looking fresher and healthier. Are you happy with your plant collection and what would you change? Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm really, really happy with my plant collection. I am so proud of it. I love it. What would I change? I mean, when I say I'm happy with it and I love it, that is so true. However, and I've said this before, sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming. It depends very much on my schedule and how much time I've got to offer my plants, because I mean, a lot of them do require quite a lot of care to actually be on top of, like besides just watering. Things like pest treating, pest checking, keeping the leaves clean. Like, it's very rare that I feel like I am 100% on top of everything in my collection. That is very rare. I'm feeling pretty on top at the moment, if I'm being honest, but like, I'm still sat here with things to do. There's always things to do. So yeah, that's not a bad thing because I love plant care. But what would I change? I mean, I don't know what kind of world we're living in here, but hypothetically, I'd love to not have to deal with pests. I would change the fact that my plants get pests, but I know that is just unavoidable. Oh, if I could change one thing, I would change, not that I don't adore my flats, because I do, or me and Ross's flat, should I say. I love it so much. And coming from my mum's conservatory to here, I feel so grateful to have my own space to be able to grow my plants. But I guess if I could change one thing, it would be the space. I would want a little bit more space, just because since I've moved here, obviously I've moved another person in that time as well, which I think is very valid. It is still a 1-bedroom flat with 300 plants, a very big dog, and Ross and all of his belongings as well. But my collection has also grown massively in the time that I've lived here. Not just my plants physically growing, but I've obviously acquired a lot more as well. And I think it's kind of just like, and I've said this before, but like how a goldfish grows to its bowl. I feel like when you're a planty person and you've got space, you just figure out how to manage more plants because you want to fill your space with plants. So the thought of leaving here makes me so sad, but I think I would choose more space if I had to just say one thing. I really like that question though. Out of interest, what would you guys change in your plant collections if you had to change one thing? I think pests is one that everyone would change if they could. I don't know anyone that actually likes dealing with pests. Although interestingly enough, I was talking about fungus gnats the other day, and I was talking about the ways that you can get them gone and how I love to use nematodes. And a lot of you were replying saying, get carnivorous plants. Like, I'm trying to get more fungus gnats in my home because my carnivorous plants love it so much. And that's actually a very valid point. And it does make me want to get more carnivorous plants. Oh my goodness. I think I've caught the carnivorous plants bug. And the only thing that is stopping me from getting more right now is firstly that they are quite high maintenance. They do need to, most of them remain consistently moist all the time. And also they don't like tap water. They don't like just the normal standard stuff that I get here in the UK. It's much too hard for them. It's got too many treatment chemicals. They love rainwater. They love distilled water. They love reverse osmosis water, but they are not a fan of tap water. And currently I am buying my distilled water. I just get it on Amazon, and it is, in itself, it's not that expensive, but obviously when you're using it a lot, it does add up. Sometimes if I've got access to rainwater, I will use rainwater, but obviously predicting when it's going to rain is not always the most realistic thing, especially coming into summer. When eventually me and Ross have our own place, again, our bigger space, I would love to get a reverse osmosis fitting put onto our water system, put onto like the kitchen tap, for example, and just use that for all my plants. And actually, I was looking on, this popped up on TikTok the other day. I sound so old when I said TikTok there. It popped up on TikTok. But I was looking at, you can get reverse osmosis filters for your water that you just put in, like kind of like a manual filter. And I'm very tempted to get one and try one out, to be honest. I don't think they're hellishly expensive. I mean, compared to actually getting someone to come and fit one to your tap, like a permanent one, I don't think they're that expensive. So yeah, I might give that a go and see what the outcome is, because I would love to expand my carnivorous plant collection. I think they're just so cool. And I know I always bang on about trying to create the best symbiotic relationship between plants and just the environment in your home. I think in an ideal world, I would never be using like chemical pest treatments. When I say chemical as well, I mean like harsh pesticides. I try not to do that unless it is a worst case scenario now anyway. But in an ideal world, I wouldn't be doing that whatsoever under any circumstances. I would just be using predatory mites, biological pest control, carnivorous plants, and yeah, just letting everything work almost as it would in its natural environment. That would be the dream. I know it's not always realistic to do things that way, but that is how I would love to do it long term. And then the next question was actually, how long does it take to water all your plants? So I think how long it takes me to water all my plants and how long it takes someone else to water all my plants would be two very different things. Like, for example, I know my friend Emma, she doesn't tend to go through and do everything all in one go. She will just water like this section one day and that section another day. Typically, I've got some obviously that do require more water and they will need to be kind of dealt with more regularly. But on the whole, I will put like a day aside, a day a week aside. That's not always realistic as well. Sometimes I can't do this. This is just in an ideal world. And I will go through from start to finish and check every single one of my plants, and the ones that are ready for watering will get waters then. And usually it's about 80-90% of my collection that is ready for a drink at that point, because a lot of them do dry out at quite similar rates. And when I do that, it's hard to say how long just watering takes, because I try to combine it usually with pest checking and wiping. But I can easily spend 8 hours from start to finish. And that's me being fairly thorough. I do currently, I think, have, if I count stuff in boxes as well, I think I've got about 350 plants in my collection. Some of them are teeny tiny, but when you're going through and you're kind of watering everything and checking everything, obviously that does take quite a long time. And if I was just doing like a little bit here and a little bit there, then it probably wouldn't feel as much, like if I break that up over the entire week. Also, there are some plants in my collection that just don't need watering every week, so it's not like, oh my god, that's a lot of time to be spending on such a regular basis, but I don't have to do a full start to finish every single week, if that makes sense. But yeah, cool. I think I'm happy with this one. I love the Boston Fern so much, and mine is growing so beautifully for me at the moment. Again, this is one that I have completely lopped back to nothing, I think 3 or 4 times now, but she is now growing really well for me. And I've got her right in a south-facing window, which some people might be surprised about, because people always bang on about how ferns can easily burn. And I think just because I've acclimated her well, she can take direct sun and never gives me any grief at all. But yeah, oh, my camera again is about to die, so I'm just going to change the battery. Belle, just before I put you back on the tripod, I thought I would just give you a look into the box that's here. It's currently absolute chaos. Things have fallen. I've got some plants that are browning and need attention. I'm not sure how much, as I say, I'm going to be able to do today, just because I don't have a lot of the things that I need. But I am just going to get a couple of things out and have a look at them properly and see if there's anything I could do to just get this box looking a little bit healthier. The one thing I am really impressed with is that Monstera dubia leaf, the huge one, hasn't died back, which makes me think exciting things might be happening. So yeah, I was absolutely convinced that this leaf was going to die back. Like, look at the size of that. That is ginormous. I really thought that when I propagated this plant, this would yellow and this wouldn't make it. And I'm assuming that means that in here it is rooting. And I'm like, do I take it out? Do I mess with it? Or do I just leave it for a little bit? It's not putting out any new growth just yet. And this was a top cutting. So maybe I should just let it be for a little bit longer. I'm not entirely sure. It's definitely not top priority, seeing as it seems fine. So I am just going to put that to one side. I'm going to put it back in the box at the back. Next to it, I've got all these philodendrons, and I can't remember. I chopped up whatever this philodendron is, and I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to put it on the screen. I loved the ruffliness of it. I thought it was really kind of similar to the Ernestii. And I got it as a full plant. Oh, I've just seen a growth point there, a new growth point, which is really encouraging. But I got it as a full plant, and I can't remember why I decided to chop it up now, but I decided to chop it up. And so I've got multiple sections of it in here, which actually on the whole look like they're doing pretty well. I just have got some yellowing. Actually, in the mother plant by the looks of it. Just lift that out and have a look. Oh yeah, that leaf is actually going really quite mouldy. So yeah, to prevent this spreading in the prop box, I am just going to chop that leaf completely back. And although I could leave this one, I'm just going to give it a trim, the yellow bit of trim back, I think. Because again, it is putting out new growth, which is really encouraging, and I'm so glad it is. It's actually putting out growth from 2 points. See one bit at the bottom, and then this leaf just here as well. So yeah, I'll come back to it again in a little while and see how it's doing. But apart from that, in here, I've got so many, in fact, everything looks like it's doing really well. So many variegated monstera cuttings. I chopped up one of my many variegated monsteras recently, and I've got loads and loads and loads of sections of that. I love the balance of variegation on this one. I think it's so stunning. And despite the fact that there is some yellow leaves here and there, and a very gross roots coming out of the Cebu Blue Cup. Ugh, yuck. As I say, everything else does look pretty good. The Cebu Blue actually is one that at some point I would like to put up and get a lovely full plant of going again, because I do love the Cebu Blue. It's just that every time I've had it as a full plant in my collection, I've neglected it, and I don't know why. Like, it's not even, it hasn't been an intentional thing. I've just suddenly gone, oh my God, my Cebu Blue looks awful. Maybe I just have been putting it in positions where I'm not very good at monitoring it. I don't know. Often I think if I've got a plant that I'm neglecting, though, it's probably a sign that I'm not loving it. And this is one that I didn't want to completely get rid of. So I was like, I'll put it into a box and come back to it a few months down the line and see how I'm feeling about it. And you know what? If I had some soil right now, definitely don't think I've got enough in there, but if I had some soil, I would pot this up and I would get it going. So maybe that is on my list of things to do next week. Because yeah, now that I've removed that yellow growth, that is looking really lovely and healthy. Really gorgeous. So pretty. I love the silveriness to its leaves. And I know you can absolutely get this plant onto a moss pole and it is capable of producing beautiful fenestrations, but I just quite like it as like a simple hanging plant, kind of like my Epipremnum skeleton key, how I'm growing that one. I've kind of given up trying to achieve the form with it, and I just quite like growing it as a hanger. So yeah, I will give this one another go in due course. And everything else, as I say, for the time being, I'm pretty happy with. I thought it was going to be carnage in that box, to be honest. There is quite a lot of stuff that's kind of fallen over and a few more leaves that need removing. But it's nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be, which is always good. Because I said in my top 10 plants video the other day, one of my prop boxes, which again is still here because I haven't dealt with it, everything dried out in it and just died back. And I on the whole, yeah, you can see everything is just bone dry. But on the whole, I think I'm pretty good at monitoring my prop boxes, but I do have a lot of them. I've got not just big boxes like this, but I've got loads of little tubs and containers and like Tupperwares, and I've probably got like, I don't know, 15 prop boxes in total just around my flat. And this one was right at the bottom of a pile of loads of them. All of the others looked absolutely fine. It had a grow light positioned on it. And yeah, I just haven't checked on it in such a long time, and I had no idea that everything was drying out in there. So it's completely my own fault, but I'm a little bit gutted about it. So you live and you learn, don't you? And in fact, one of the questions that I know came through because I saw it earlier was how to prevent mould in prop boxes. And I know this is perhaps a slightly different type of propagation box to what you're talking about, because I know when you've got like just a layer of moss or perlite or something at the bottom, it can be a bit different. But I mean, sometimes it does just happen. Sometimes prop boxes do just mould. It's happened to me before. Not, granted, not for quite a long time, but as you can see, dramas are still happening for me in different ways. Typically, if I've allowed everything a good amount of time to callus over before I put it into a prop box, and then I just stay fairly on top of monitoring my plants and just making sure that, like, for example, when one thing starts to mould, I'm dealing with that straight away and I'm getting it out of the prop box. If you are propagating in sphagnum moss, for example, and something does rot on the bottom layer and then you put another plant in its place, that can make that plant much more susceptible to rotting. So I think just making sure that you're keeping the environment fairly clean. But typically, like, I don't open my prop boxes much. It is quite rare. I'll open them when I think my cuttings are rooted and, I was going to say, ready for harvest. That's the only time where I'll open my prop boxes, but you can typically just tell by looking through the box what's going on in there. But yeah, I'm going to come back to these ones in a little while. This actually is very wet, probably too wet, but I don't have soil to repot it. So this is going to be a job for the next couple of days. But the next thing that I wanted to do, oh, in fact, I've got a very little thing here that is going to take all of 2 seconds, so I may as well do it. This beautiful begonia that I still don't have an accurate ID on is growing like a weed. Like, I got this at the Bristol plant swap, which I think was about 2 or 3 months ago, maybe 3 months ago now, and it was a 1-leaf cutting, and this is just an insane amount of growth from that time. It wasn't even rooted when I got it, and it rooted within, like, it started putting out roots literally within 24 hours of me putting it in water, and I was like, what? That's crazy. But yeah, as I say, no one has been able to tell me exactly what this plant is. If you know, or if you have any theories at all, please, 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 please comment them down below, because I just want to know what this plant is. I obviously know it's a begonia, but apart from that, I have no idea. But because it is growing so quickly, I'd like to encourage it to keep growing upwards. I'm just going to stake it, and I've only got this really long stake, but considering the rate at which this plant is growing, I'm not that fast. I think I'm just going to go for it. And somewhere I've got some gardening twine, but I don't know where that is, so I'm just going to use some wool to tie it on there, and then I could just keep tying as it grows. But someone asked, if you could only grow one plant forever, which would it be? I've had questions like this before, and I honestly, I find them really genuinely hard to answer because my favourite plants do change a lot. And I'm just thinking about which long term would be the most rewarding to grow, which is really difficult, but I'm thinking about one that I could really get the best out of. And I think I would probably go pretty classic, and I think I would say something like Monstera deliciosa, just because it is a fairly low maintenance plant, so it wouldn't involve a lot of plant care, but the potential of the plant is so insane when it starts to really kind of size up and fenestrate and then have secondary and tertiary fenestrations. Like, I just find it so exciting and so cool, and I think if I could only have one plant in my house, a big Monstera deliciosa would probably be my choice. I think that's probably what I'd go for, but that's really hard. That's a very hard question. The thought of, oh my god, the thought of getting rid of my plants just breaks my heart. Like, me and Ross were talking recently about would we ever consider moving abroad? And we were like, oh, wouldn't it be so nice to live somewhere with a little bit more sunshine and it's not so cold and rainy all the time? And yeah, the thought of having to leave my plants in order to do that, I mean, obviously Yoli would come, but the thought of having to leave my plants and restart my collection just makes me not want to do it. I know I could absolutely do it, but I would miss my plants so much. I feel so proud of them. And I know although I could get more, these ones, I don't know, they're so special. So yeah, that's something that's putting me off doing it. And also, my God, back to this plant, not only is it growing upwards at an insane rate, it's also putting out so much, I don't know if you can probably see, but so much growth, like at every single node coming up the stem. It's going to be bushy as anything. And I love it. I really love this. Hence why I want to know what kind of begonia it is, just so that I can do a little bit more digging. But yeah, that is one of the fastest plants to grow so far I think I've ever acquired. But if I've got enough, I think I'm going to use terrarium soil for this, and I think it should be fine. But I'd really like to repot my Thanksgiving cactus. It was labelled Christmas cactus, but I'm pretty sure it's a Thanksgiving cactus. And this is one that I picked up on the free table at another plant swap in London, I think. And already on the pot it says 50% off, so I'm guessing the person that originally had this plant got it as a deal, and I don't know, maybe they chopped and propagated it, or maybe they just didn't want it anymore, but I got it on the free table and it's incredibly root bound, like ridiculously root bound. That is all roots. And as you can see, it is quite saturated at the moment. I did give this one a really good soak through yesterday, and I don't think, I might just give it a little break up of the roots. I don't think I'm going to go too crazy with breaking up the roots in this plant, just because I don't want to disrupt it too much. And then, although I am low on everything, I do somewhere have, here it is, a little bag of terrarium soil, which has got lots of grit and lots of sand and stuff like that in it, I think, just from looking at it, and I think that should be good for this one. Might actually just be able to go straight in there. And technically, I guess I should be washing out this pot. I know some people do ask, like, do you sterilise your pots between using them? If I've got two plants that have had zero issues and no signs of pests, maybe this is me being lazy, but I don't bother. I really don't bother. So yeah, I'm just going to go straight into that one, I think. Oh yeah, but these roots are so tightly bound. The next question was, succulents by the window are going grey and floppy. Any advice? Oh, grey. I mean, so the only time I can think, it wasn't exactly grey, but the only time I can think of that I have seen succulents go almost kind of translucent and floppy especially being by a window, is cold damage. And that I've had that actually with my Crassula ovata before, when it's been pushed right up against a very cold window. Some of its leaves have gone a little bit floppy, and I guess you could call that grey. I don't know whereabouts in the world you are, the person that asked this question, but my guess would be somewhere that is fairly cold. That's the immediate thing that springs to mind. Again, something potentially fungal could have the same, kind of give off the same symptoms, although that's not something that I've personally experienced with a succulent. If it is fungal, again, I would recommend obviously taking off the affected leaves, potentially getting some sort of fungicide. You can make your own. I tend to just make my own spray with baking soda. But that would be my guess. I guess overexposure to light as well. But typically, so long as if you've recently changed the position of your plants, that might be something to think about. But typically, obviously, succulents can be acclimated to take very high light. So my guess would be cold or fungal. Do you enjoy editing your videos? I mean, yes, some days I do, other days it's a little more tedious. I mean, to be honest, I don't mind editing videos like this so much because I very rarely have to do any kind of major edits. It's very straightforward. If I'm doing more of a kind of informative, like for example, I did one recently on like the benefits of cabinet growing, and I did lots of different angles, and I really tried to kind of make it engaging to watch, as well as like, so it wasn't just like me sat down chatting. Those ones are a little bit more tedious to edit, but to be honest, now that I've kind of got over the like watching myself back, which my God, I found so difficult to do when I first started doing YouTube. I found it so awkward to watch myself. Now that I've just got used to the fact that that's just one of these things. It's just kind of what I do now. I don't mind the editing side of it at all. For those of you that don't know my background, I trained as an actor, but then I also worked as a video editor for quite a long time. I was doing that freelance up until a couple of years ago. And so it is a side of video making that I have I don't know, I've always quite enjoyed. So although there are some days where I'm like, the last thing I want to do is sit down and edit a video, I do typically find it quite fun. Are you still using predatory mites, and do they actually work? So yes, I am still using predatory mites, and in fact I said this the other day, but I've recently released 50,000, I think they're, oh I can't remember the name of them actually, Amblysius cucumaris, I think. I can see it just in the corner there, which are for juvenile thrips. I found a few thrips in my cabinet, and then I found a few scattered over by the window, and although it wasn't an infestation, I was like, oh my God, especially at this time of year when the weather is a little bit warmer, they breed so quickly. I was like, you know what, let's just get a ton of them and nip this in the bud before it's even started. And yeah, it's been less than a week, and already I can, like, in my cabinet, I haven't seen a single thrip since, which is really good. I just find them a really great way of keeping on top of pests in my collection. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're never gonna get pests. I think you're always gonna get pests from time to time if you've got lots of plants, but it is the only form of pest control that I've used over a long period of time now, and actually like stuck to without worrying about the health of my plants. Again, like I said earlier, creating symbiotic relationships in your home between everything. I just, for me, think it's the best way of doing things. And I have made kind of more detailed videos on like the ins and outs of biological pest control and how it's nothing to be scared of. But I just think it's a really great way of doing things. Like, I have found that my plant care is just much lower maintenance on the whole when I've got predators doing the work for me. I still obviously sometimes, as I say, will have an outbreak on like that plant over there that I haven't put any predatory mites on for a few months. It does happen, but yeah, I think it's a really good way of doing things. One of you said tattoo tour, please. I've noticed a few of the planty ones in your videos. So I actually only have one planty tattoo. I would really like to get more. I'd really like to get more. But I've got, how many tattoos have I got? So this was my first one. I don't know how well you can see it. And in fact, upside down, this is the worst way of showing you. Upside down, everyone always says, I'll put a clip in because this is awful. Everyone always says it looks like a monster, but this is actually the necklace that my nana used to wear around her neck, and she left it for me when she died. And I think the actual necklace ended up breaking. My mum's now got it, but anyway, I got it tattooed. That was my first one when I was 17, 18, I think. Then I've got one on the back of my neck, which I don't like. Again, not sure how well you'll be able to see it, but I've got a big mandala thing on the back of my neck, and I designed it myself. And I took the drawing to the tattoo artist and I basically showed him the picture. He was like, yeah, no problem at all. And as he was tattooing, he did say some of these lines are very fine. I'm going to need to make them a little bit bolder. And I said to him, can it still please be really, really delicate? Kind of like the one that I will show you in a minute that's just here. And he was like, oh yeah, no worries, no worries. And anyway, it was not delicate. It's way too, for me and my style. I know some people might love it, but for me and my style, it's too like stamped and bold. So I would like to get something done to it at some point. I wouldn't get it lasered or anything like that, I don't think, but I don't know, maybe just get a few more details, like finer details added into it to just make it a little bit softer. And then, oh, I've got a tattoo just there, which says Adventure in Thai. You can guess where I got that. That was a hand-poked one. I know it's very cliche and a little bit corny, but I absolutely love it. I really like that tattoo. I've got one on my foot that says ferret in Greek. Long story. And then this one, which is arguably my favourite one, I think, which again, I'm going to need to put some clips in of because it looks so pale on camera here. That's my planty one, and I got that last year and I love it so much. Again, I was after something really delicate. This is what I wish the one on my neck, the back of my neck could have been. And the artist was absolutely lovely, absolutely lovely. I want to go back to her actually at some point soon because she basically was like, it took like 6 hours in total because she was like, I'm going to do it really, really lightly and then I'm going to build it up so that you can tell me essentially how heavy you want it, because she knew I had a bad experience before and she didn't want to go overboard. So although it took a very long time, it was totally worth it because I've come away with something that I'm really, really happy with. Also, these roots are just not budging, so I'm gonna just go in with some substrate around it, I think. I've spread some of the bottom roots and I think I'm happy with that. I'm not gonna do any more because it's too much and I don't want to disrupt the plant too much. But yeah, also fun, I was gonna say fun fact, just something fun to say. The lovely tattoo artist that did my planty tattoo, I brought her a cutting of one of the plants that she tattooed because I've got a Hoya Bella in there. I brought her a cutting of that to my tattoo appointment last year, and she messaged me on Instagram a few weeks ago just saying that the Hoya Bella is doing really well and it's actually flowering, which made me really happy. It's obviously doing very well for her, which is amazing. And I'm actually quite jealous because I no longer have a full Hoya Bella plant in my collection because I killed mine. It got mealybugs and it's no longer with us. So yeah. But yeah, I absolutely would love to book in with her at some point again soon. I've got loads that I would like to get. And I think back when I was doing acting, I was very reluctant to do anything. Not, of course you can be an actor and you can have tattoos. So many people do nowadays. But I was like, as I'm trying to break into the industry, why make things any more difficult for myself? Like if it comes down to, I don't know, a lead at the National Theatre that involves someone being not tattooed and it's between me, who's covered in tattoos, and someone of equal abilities who hasn't got tattoos, I was like, obviously they're going to give it to that person. So yeah, that stopped me doing quite a lot of stuff for a while, and now I'm like, you know what, dye your hair, pierce your body, tattoo it, do whatever makes you happy. So yeah, I would like to get more. But I'm done. Yeah, I'm not going to water it through, seeing as I did just water it the other day, but I'm happy with that, and I think the plant is going to be much happier as well. And again, I haven't got through all of the questions, but I've got a very expectant Yoli looking at me wanting to go out for a walk, and I kind of want to dodge the rain because it is dry at the moment, so I think I'm going to leave this video here. Again, I'll come back to the questions when I next do a plant choursy video. But I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you were doing planty stuff along with me, I really hope you got through lots. I hope you made good progress. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.
Stay sexy, plant lovers.